You know, I saw in the program, as I said to the organizers when I walked in, that you had one of the academics from USP speak before me. So I kind of would have gathered what he would have said to you. In fact, I picked up this book. It's called Representations of an Intellectual by Edward Said. Those people know him. He's from Columbia University. Unfortunately, he died a few years ago of cancer. And he was a very critical thinker. And Edward Said talked about in this BBC radio lecture series about how that if you are in particular an academic or somebody who's supposed to be part of the group of people who are to provide independent opinion on any matter within society, whether it's economics, whether it's societal changes, whether it's climate, whatever it may be, that you need to be always very critically objective. And in fact, this book talks about you need to be relentlessly honest. You must have a rigor of thought and conscience and a sublime disdain for dogma. And if I could, in our discussions also, so probably talk about that, because I think as leaders, you're attending a leadership course, you need to be, in order to be an effective leader, you need to be always conscious about the fact that there is an alternative view. That you must consider all options before you actually can make a decision, or before you should make a decision. And also at times you need to make a decision because it simply needs to be made at that point in time. The Fijian economy obviously is in a very good position compared to what it was probably about 10 years ago. And just by way of introductory remarks, I'd like to make some comments regarding that. The reality is that we have had 7 years of unprecedented growth. The growth rate, in particular in the past 3 years, has been in excess of 4%, which again is completely unprecedented for Fiji. Now, what does that mean? It means that there is, of course, there is more prosperity. The poverty levels in Fiji has dropped by about a little more than 3% compared to the same when it was done the last time. But what is also more important is that the Gini coefficient shows that the inequality in Fiji has also dropped. And that is very significant because many countries, for example, even if you look at countries like India, China, and numerous other countries in the Asia-Pacific region, wherever there is economic growth, it does not necessarily mean that the disparity between the rich and the poor is getting closer. In fact, in many countries where the growth rates have shot through the roof, the disparity is in fact widened. And we believe it is a responsibility of any government to ensure that with growth rates, you are also able to share that growth with everybody. And that is very critically important. Now, how do you do that without necessarily intervening into the market with too much intervention in the market and upsetting the equilibrium? And that is, as you've seen, and we'll discuss that, in Fiji we've done it by way of, for example, having targeted assistance to people below a particular income level. So, we have free medicine for people below who earn less than $20,000 a year. If you earn less than, a household earns less than $30,000 a year using 95 kilowatts of electricity, we subsidize the electricity cost. The unit cost of a household electricity is 34 cents a unit. We pay 17 cents directly to FEA on behalf of these people. Similarly with water, we have 90,250 liters of water is given to a household that earns less than $30,000 a year, based on WHO standards that a person requires. You and I require about 50 liters of water a day, to go to the toilet, to have your shower, to drink water, to cook, to wash your clothes, etc. So that's what it's based on, with an average of 5 people in a household. So these are the kind of interventions we have done in order to be able to bring people at the bottom end of the socioeconomic scale up to a particular level. Free education. Now, that obviously has assisted a lot of people, but it is there for the long term. It is there for the long term because we believe in investing in our human resources. The fact that you now have more than about 16 to 17,000 students in universities at the moment, as we speak, who are assisted by government, either through the Topper Scholarship or through the TELS program, means in about 3-4 years you'll have a bigger cadre of people, bigger cadre of Fijians in Fiji who will be qualified to carry out work in respective areas. Now, some people may actually stay in Fiji. We hope more and more of them will stay in Fiji. Some people may actually be used as expatriates to go and work in the Pacific Island countries. Some people may eventually migrate. But the reality is that you're investing in the human capital that in fact deteriorated in Fiji fundamentally since 1987 after the first coup that we had. We had two coups in 1987, for those who know your history. So the test of any economy of any government is, what is the vision? What is the vision for the economy? Where do you want to be in 10, 15, 20 years' time? What is your objective and how do you get there? And as we've said in the budget announcement recently, where we changed the financial year, and I can talk to you about that, we have a particular vision in place. So when you have a vision in place, the objective obviously is to ensure that we put in place the fundamentals to be able to achieve that vision, to be able to achieve that objective. No country in the world has ever become great economically or even socially, for that matter, without a vision, without having a long-term goal. Now, if you are going to, you can't say, for example, let's vote in this government and the economy will get fixed up as soon as they get elected in. It's not going to happen. It does not work that way. Many people come and tell you that that's how it works. It doesn't work that way. Many of the policies that we put in place about 5 years ago, we are reaping the benefits of that today. Mark Hallaby is here. He's going to tell you as a business person that just because we make an announcement on a particular taxation matter or what have you, it does not mean that all the businesses will suddenly say, okay, this is great, let's do it. Some people take time. They dip their toes in the water to see whether it's going to actually work or not. There needs to be consistency in policies in all other areas for them to be able to know that the environment is secure. They need to know that FERCA is actually functioning properly, that they're not just a bunch of guys who are always after you. That they actually see you as a customer. They see you as a client. They also need to know, for example, how government services are working. They need to know how roads, water, electricity is functioning. You've got the new CEO of FRA here with you. Now, a lot of people have said, well, the FRA budget is enormous. Well, compared to other periods, yes, it is enormous. But have you seen the deteriorated state of our infrastructure? Have you seen in parts, between Suba and Nosori, places that were tahsil and, back in the 1990s, and now it's just gravel road. This is smack in the middle of a largest city in Fiji, the capital city of Fiji, and you have places in Nandera, Makoi, etc. All these streets, some of them, they don't have tahsil anymore. Why is that? Was the construction, was the design, when it was built then, not good enough? Did they actually put the amount of tar they were supposed to, but they actually didn't? I mean, these are the questions we all need to ask. But the fact of the matter is it's a rebuild. Now, this is a story that I like telling. One of the garment factories, which is, they're not competing with Mark, but they do their own thing, in Nandawa. Now, they said to us, in United Apparel, they said to us before they felt really embarrassed, really mandua to take the customers down there to the factory. Because when they got off Nosori Airport, the road itself was not good. When they turned into Nandawa, it was sort of bounced all the way up to the factory and smack in the middle of somewhere that maybe does not look very nice, salubrious, looks more like a slum, and smack in the middle of that you have a factory. Now, because the environment is a lot better, the road is a lot better, the street lighting is a lot better, they actually want to bring their clients from Australia and New Zealand to show them the factory. They are able to say to them, look, Australia is only 4 hours away. And here we are, people work in good conditions, the road is good. You don't even have to say half of that, because your image itself improves. So when building a road is not just about fixing up the road per se, it's about all the extraneous factors that have an impact because of the fact that you fixed up the road. In the same way that we say, we're doing the 4-laning of the road in Nandi, the traffic is there, but we also want, in conjunction with the renovations at Nandi Airport, we want the Australian tourists or the New Zealand tourists to get off the plane, they catch a 6:30 flight, they arrive in Nandi at 10, 11 a.m. in the morning, they have a seamless process through the Nandi Airport, nice environment, get in the car, in a taxi, 4-lane road in Denara. We want them to be drinking their champagne or their beer by midday on the beach. Why are we doing that? We are competing with other destinations. They can go to Bali. Bali is actually in some ways a lot cheaper. They can go to Phuket. They can go to Gold Coast. They may now even go to Vanuatu or Solomon Islands. So we always have to be one step ahead of the game. But the wonderful thing about it is not just about tourists, it's also about our people too. So you'll see, for example, the infrastructure rebuild that we've had in Nandi, the 4-laning, you don't see any overhead power lines. You only see the street lights. That again, of course, is, you can argue and say that's adaptation, climate adaptation. So next time when the cyclone passes through that way, none of the street lights will fall down. There's no power lines to fall down, it's all underground. And that's what you call climate change adaptation. It also is quite aesthetically very pleasing. The COFRA tells me there'll be some very nice flowers, potted flowers along that way. It makes me look better. Some of you have traveled to Singapore. You know, you get off at the airport in Singapore, everything looks fine. You know, nice flowers, nice highway. People speak to you properly. It's organized. Makes you want to go back there again. So this is how we're trying to position Fiji also through the infrastructure rebuild that we have. But it's also providing the enormous amount of accessibility to ordinary Fijians. There are still people in Fiji who do not have the services that most of you take for granted. Even things like access to water, access to electricity. So this is a huge bill. If you see, for example, Water Authority Fiji, and I understand the CEO is going to speak to you, has got an unprecedented budget of in excess of $300 million. Apart from the fact that some of that money is for the rebuild after the damage caused by Cyclone Winston, the fact of the matter is we still need to get a lot of people to have accessibility. So you'll see, in fact, in this Saturday's Fiji Sun, we'll be putting out brochures to tell the public of Fiji where the spend is going. So you'll see in the leaflet, for example, Water Authority Fiji is distributing, Village X, how many 5,000 liter water tanks, which settlement, wherever the water tanks are being distributed. You'll see where the COFRA intends to fix up the roads, what bridges are getting fixed. All of that will be put in that leaflet and will be distributed to the public. So you have a clear indication as to exactly how that money is being spent. So the reality is that at the same time, you need to ensure that the budget is all about balancing priorities. It's about juggling priorities. Now, one key indication, of course, is if you look at the budget spend prior to 2007, the budget is spent 85% of whatever government budgeted for in a year, on average, went to operational cost. 15% went on infrastructure cost. So essentially, most of the money that was raised through a deficit, most of the revenue that was raised went into paying for everyday costs, expenses. Fuel, wages, photocopying, paper, whatever it was. These basic type of things. On the other hand, and of course paying for franchises and what have you. And 15% went into building roads, hospitals, whatever it was. Now the expenditure mix is 60-40. So 60% of what we raise through the budget, both in revenue and also by way of borrowing, goes into operational cost. And 40% goes into asset build. Now, in the same way that I've used the example, when you go to borrow money, you need to be able to show that something has come out of the money. You don't go and borrow money to go and have a party at McDonald's. Because when you borrow money to a party at McDonald's, you leave the McDonald's and there's nothing to show for it. But if you borrow money to go and do a renovation to your house and build a fence, you actually have something to show for it after you've spent the money. That's your asset. And that will stay there for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So that's money well spent. As long as you have the proper tendering process, the proper processes are followed, and you get value for your dollar, that's a good investment. So based on that, what we are saying is that a deficit that caters for expenditure in asset build is actually a good thing. And in fact, today we are in such a position that our total revenue that we collect, in particular through FERCA, your STT, your environmental levy, your VAT, and various other revenue that we raise, or other fees and licenses that people pay, our total revenue collection is enough to pay for our operating expenditure. So we are not borrowing to pay for operational costs. We are only borrowing to pay for asset build, which is a good position. Because there's no point borrowing money to pay for your daily expenses. So that's some of the fundamentals, and I've got the figures here. I don't necessarily want to bore you with all the figures. Now, I know there's also been talk about debt. The debt stock in 2000 from 1997 to 2006, the debt stock increased by 1.3 billion. But at the same time, the expenditure on capital expenditure was only 2 billion total. So the reality is that you see that in excess of about $2 billion we inherited as debt stock at the end of 2006. When we came into government in 2007, there's already a debt stock of in excess of $2 billion. A lot of people think, oh, it's only when a government comes in that they are the ones who accumulate the debt. No, we're still paying off debts monies that were borrowed in the 1990s, because you have 10-year loans, 20-year loans, 15-year loans, and you have, of course, the treasury notes and what have you that's being issued. So other investors like insurance companies, FNPF, etc., buy your TCs, the TN. Sorry. So the reality is that with the debt stock, what is generally the indicator is what's your percentage of debt to GDP ratio. Now the Fiji's GDP, and just put in simple terms, your GDP is the total value of goods and services that a country produces every year. So the higher the GDP, obviously, the more wealth a country has. Now, countries like Japan have a debt to GDP ratio of more than 100%. In other words, the value of their debt stock is more than the value of their GDP. In some countries, about 80-90%. In Fiji, the debt to GDP ratio in 2006 was approximately 56%. It came down to, this year would have been about 47%. We've been progressively bringing it down. But because of the rebuild, the debt to GDP ratio is about 50.4%, hovering around about there, because of the rebuild that we put in place in this budget. That is still a very good position to be in. Of course, we want to continuously try and reduce it. We're looking at new ways of raising revenue. But at the same time, new ways of raising revenue does not mean new structures of taxation. If you see in the budget announcement, we have not introduced anything out of the ordinary. We believe that the taxation regime is actually in a very good place. What we now need to build upon is compliance. In 2006, 2007, there's a 2006 actually World Bank study done. In fact, it was released in 2007. They said that 1/3 of the value of our GDP was in the black. In other words, there's a black economy. There's an illegal economy operating in Fiji, and 1/3 of the value of GDP. If you take 1/3 of the value of GDP today, it will be approximately $3 billion. $3 billion in Fiji, you could argue at the moment, is unaccounted for. People doing deals under the table, people doing cash transactions. This is why FIRCA is going to introduce the point of sale, the machines they're introducing that. So they will get real live data on how much sales the supermarket is doing. So they'll exactly know and actually reduce the ability of people to cook the books, so to speak. And this is one of the reasons why, for example, we brought uniformity in VAT in the last financial year that was announced. Because you had some people, when you go to supermarket, the days when you had some goods that were VAT exempt. But a supermarket would be selling goods that were not VAT exempt and goods that were VAT exempt. And as you know that you file your VAT returns. So when you have such a situation, it gave them the opportunity to be able to cook the books. So you have FIRCA paying out VAT returns when they really should not be paying out VAT returns. And to be able to go and monitor that entire process you have to employ thousands of people. So the overall approach was to reduce VAT. And the Reserve Bank, of course, we brought this about after numerous studies, and the Reserve Bank of Fiji carried out, of course, their own independent assessment and said that with the reduction of VAT from 15% to 9%, notwithstanding the fact that you will introduce VAT on those 6 or 7 items, the overall cost of your groceries, your basket, the basket of groceries will come down by 4.5%. So it was not a burden per se to the average consumer because of the VAT introduction on the VAT exempt items, but because of the fact that you're reducing VAT overall, it reduces the cost of the basket of groceries. Because you don't simply rely on tin fish and oil, which is what VAT exempt, or flour or rice. You need toothpaste, you need potatoes, you need onions. All of these things you used to pay VAT on before, but the VAT on that has come down. You need to buy sanitary pads, you need to buy toilet paper. Everyday living expenses and the introduction of VAT reduction meant the price of those goods will come down. But as Perka will tell you, and hopefully they will tell you, there are 32 companies, nearly 32 companies that did not pass on the VAT reduction. We introduced a law when we introduced the reduction in VAT to say that anybody that does not pass on the VAT reduction will be committing an offense. And despite that law, 32 companies did not reduce VAT. So they were issued with infringement notices, and 32 companies have paid. So you see, there is also this culture within our economy, within certain sectors, where people are trying to always not necessarily do the right thing. They're only seeing up to their noses. They're not looking at the long term. What we are saying is that business houses also need to look at the long term. For example, we have companies that may be cooking the books. They may be having larger, sort of huge margins on one sale. Our philosophy is that you actually need to work on a higher volume, generally speaking. Work on a higher volume, lower margin, higher volume. We still have people in Fiji who may be recycling nails. We still have people in Fiji who are recycling corrugated iron. Not necessarily because of the shortage. We have a bit of shortage at the moment because everybody's doing a rebuild. But because of affordability issues. And we have seen in certain areas that the margins are enormous. Now if they reduce the margin, you have more people buying it. So you have a higher turnover of goods. I'll give you an example, and maybe then I'll sort of wind up, and then we can ask a lot more questions. A few years ago, I walked into a shop in Nandi where they had a very fantastic bula shirt. The price was $65. So I asked the guy, I said, how much? He said, for you, $20. Then somebody else walked in, who was also a Fijian, and he said to him, $25. So I said to him, I said, look, you're obviously not selling that shirt to me at a loss, you're still making money on it. Maybe you're selling it at cost to me. But you're obviously making money on by selling it at $25 to the other guy. So it goes to show that you can still make money at $25. He said, why have you got $65? He said, this is the tourist price. That's the tourist price. I said, but if you sell that shirt at $25, the tourist will walk in and say, great price. Can I have 5, please? I want to buy one for my uncle and my cousin and my nephew and whoever else. That's what we do. Right? When I travel overseas, you go to some country where something is cheap, you suddenly think of all these relatives you never thought of before you buy that stuff. Because it's affordable. And I'm happy to say, today you go down to Nandi Main Street, even if you go to Port Denrau, those fake polo t-shirts they sell. There's one price, it's $19. The bula shirt is whatever price it is, $25. So they've stopped distinguishing between the tourist and the local. And that has also meant that they're getting a higher volume in terms of people buying stuff. You see, you go to Nandi Town, you got tourists, wearing the local shorts, the local, the bula shirts, etc. So there is merit in that. It also improves the quality of the lives of people generally to make affordable, have affordability as one of the issues. I think the other point that we'd like to also make is that if you look at the long-term vision of Fiji, how are we positioning ourselves? Nearly 70% of our population is below the age of 40. It's about 69.6% is below the age of 40. Now there's enormous challenges, there's enormous opportunities in that too. Again, one of the quotes that I've kind of latched on to, one of the former presidents of India said that, our youth need to not be job seekers, they need to be job creators. because he believed that the youth have the most fire. People have the most fire in their belly are the youth, and we need to be able to tap into that. This is why one of the announcements we made in the budget is that we are going to set up a national framework for micro, small and medium enterprises and have a national structure on that. Somewhat following the Malaysian model, but they're still trying to finalize that. Because at the moment you have, for example, Ministry of Women, Ministry of Economic Affairs, Rural Development, Industry and Trade, everybody doing a little bit of something in small to medium enterprises, micro enterprises. The idea is to bring them under one. And then in that system, we not only give finance, but we also have business incubation, we have mentoring, we have training. So we have a one-stop approach to that. The majority of the people, for example, in Fiji, not a majority, but a substantial number of people are in the informal sector. How do we actually bring them into the formal sector without necessarily having too many rigid compliance issues? How do we get them to value add? I'll give you a very simple example. When you travel from Suva to Nandi, you find a lot of people selling coconuts. Now, one of my favorite stopovers is Korovislo. I stop there. So I know there's one particular place I go to, so I ask them, how much do you make? Oh, sometimes you make $200 a week. Sometimes you make $100 a week. Sometimes you make $50 a week. Depending on the weather, depending on the availability of coconuts, all of that things are the factors. Now, how do we help them actually sustain? $200 a week, non-taxable is not bad, some people would say. Now, but you go to certain other places I've seen where they used to sell coconut and you take it to your mouth and you drink it. There's certain places now they're putting the straw. Like you see those guys in the McDonald's strip, some of them actually put a straw. There's some people now who actually, cut the spoon you make from the husk. You nicely, they put it in the water and they give that to you. That's a very, very, very rudimentary way of what you call value adding. Is there opportunity in bottling that water? Is there an opportunity that some business people we help them tie up with them so they can, can water? Coconut is a big thing now. Coconut, everything you put coconut in jackpot. They're now putting coconut oil in vodka, and not coconut oil, but coconut drink in vodka and what have you. So the point is, we need to be able to provide some form of assistance to these people and be able to then improve their living standards. Those kind of very basic ideas. The M-Pesa program was actually finalized by somebody from Lambasa, a young man from Lambasa who works for Vodafone. Now, who would have thought some guy from Lambasa, of all places, would be able to do that? But the reality is that there's a lot of people who have got those skill sets, and we need to be able to tap into that. So our vision for that is obviously to take advantage of those opportunities that exist because of the fact that we have a very young population. It also means we have to create jobs. We need to create jobs. We're getting more and more people who are educated, more and more people coming out of universities. What are the opportunities for them? Fiji has to be very clever about it. We need the infrastructure. Foreign investors like to see good infrastructure. They like to see good roads. Local business people, business people who've been here for ages from, Mark Alaby's been in Fiji 20, 30 years? 30 years. He left Australia and never wanted to go back. There's obviously opportunities here. People will come and see people like him and say good infrastructure, they might want to come to Fiji too. It also gives local business people, a lot of food for thought. And in fact, if you look at the growth in investment from the private sector in the past 3-4 years, it was driven by local business people, not foreigners. It was driven by local business people. They could see what was happening. So we believe there's opportunities in manufacturing in Fiji, and there's a budgetary announcement in respect of that. There's opportunities in ITC. Fiji is well placed. The Southern Cross Cable lands here. I was told a few years ago when Mindco came to set up in Fiji a call center, they said they liked Fiji for 2 reasons. We're in the right time zone. International date line passes through here in a 180-degree meridian. And apparently we have neutral accents. They say Fijians have neutral accents, so they don't need to, like in places like India or Philippines, spend millions of dollars to get people to change their accents so some American or Australian can, understand them. So that was something we did not know. But that's obviously something they know about us. So we need to take advantage of those things. But we also have to be cleverer. We can't, as Mark will tell you, we can't compete with China or Bangladesh in large-scale volume manufacturing of garments. We need to position ourselves in niche markets. I mean, he does a lot of rugby jerseys. There's opportunities, there's of course challenges that he has. We now have garment factories in Fiji who make 300-400 pieces of a particular garment, and they send it off. They fly it off by plane. It does not get warehoused in the city, it goes straight into the shop. Now, many manufacturers probably in Bangladesh won't be able to do that, but Fiji can do that. We can do quick turnaround time. So we need to be able to find our niche. And we also need to also ensure that we comply with various international standards that makes you a lot more marketable. I'll stop there because I've been given the red light. But thank you, and I hope we have some very good questions.